All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here with you all. I'm really a little sorry that it's under these circumstances, but I just want to say that the Attorney General's refusal to apply for the appointment of an independent counsel to investigate possible criminal activity related to U.S. assistance to Iraq is an affront to the American people, and it's a threat to their rightful expectation of impartial, even-handed justice. It's stonewalling, plain and simple, and it leaves all of us as American citizens with one overriding question. What is the administration trying to hide in the record of its assistance to Saddam Hussein? The Attorney General's refusal to let this matter receive further investigation flies in the face of information that has been made public through investigations by numerous committees of Congress, as well as news media and other sources. We have a 14-page letter from Mr. Barr, 14-page letter, long, pretty long, I won't say. Mr. Schumer has joined us. Come on in, Mr. Schumer. 14-page letter accompanied by a 97-page report. They've done that in 30 days. If they'd spent that time investigating, they might have found out some of what they call covered employees or associates of the President and the administration who were obviously involved. Now, the Attorney General has misconstrued, whether purposely or not, what is required under the Independent Counsel statute, a law, I might add, that he and other administration officials have spared no opportunity to condemn. The statute does not require Congress to present a signed and sealed indictment of criminal wrongdoing for the U.S. prosecutor to simply execute the next day. What it does is require that Congress find plausible evidence of possible criminal wrongdoing that warrants further investigation by an independent counsel, because the Justice Department would have a conflict of interest in investigating. Now, that test was easily met, and I would refresh the memory of the Attorney General through the letter of December the 2nd, 1986, to then Attorney General Ed Meese, requesting an independent counsel for the Iran-Contra investigation. Some of you may recall that. Apparently, in credit to him on this instance, even Mr. Meese shared the committee's view of what was required by Congress in this threshold stage. And I have a copy of the letter on the Iran-Contra, which we'll make available to you as you leave, and a copy of the letter that we sent just 30 days ago. The Attorney General says about two things in his long letter. One, that for some matters there's not specific evidence that rises to the level of indictment. Two, for those instances where there's already specific and undeniable evidence of wrongdoing, I refer particularly to the altered Commerce Department export documents, leave it to the Justice Department to investigate the matter itself. In the absence of an independent counsel statute, that might be the way how things would work. But there's a small problem. That's not how things are supposed to work, given the law that is now on the books. This letter makes clear that the department has not even attempted to move the ball downfield by investigating any lead suggested by the letter. It's simply a critique of the committee's request with no attempt at investigating the information. And that's a hunkered down response and has no place in a preliminary investigation. It's an understatement to say that I'm disappointed, a little bit exasperated with the decision transmitted today by the Department of Justice. The independent counsel statute certainly gives the Attorney General the right to say no to the committee's request. And further, it makes his decision unreviewable by any court. But the court of public opinion is open for business 24 hours a day. And that court will not be satisfied with the subterfuge concocted today. And I would like to now introduce first a distinguished chairman of the House Administration Committee and chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight on the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Charlie Rose from North Carolina.
Thank you. in all my years in Congress, have never seen a cover-up quite this extensive. I think there are more smoking guns lying around Washington and around the country in this matter than there ever were at the Battle of Bull Run, if you want to make that analogy. I believe that the president's people have made a grave error in failing to get this matter behind them decisively and quickly. And I think the American people will very quickly react to this cover-up. And I think the administration will rue the day that they didn't get to the bottom of this particular problem and let all the facts hang out. The American people have a right to know how we got the arms over there, over into the Persian Gulf region that our troops had to face when the Desert Storm battle began. The administration does not want that known. They want to cover it up. And it's a sad day for the American people.
Now let me introduce the chairman of the Crime and Criminal Justice Subcommittee on Judiciary Committee, the Honorable Chuck Schumer from New York, who flew in here to be here for this purpose. We're glad to see you.
Had to be down here today anyway, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's very nice of you to say that. Well, I would say today's decision not to seek an independent counsel falls like a Scud missile in the middle of our efforts to get the truth. In the face of strong evidence that certain administration officials lied to Congress, presented false testimony, and even altered government documents, the Attorney General is attempting to sweep the whole issue under the rug by not appointing an independent counsel. I'm particularly surprised and perplexed and angered that even on the issue of altered documents, the Attorney General said there's not enough evidence for a preliminary investigation by an independent counsel. Now, I don't doubt the Attorney General's integrity, but when the Attorney General is appointed by the President and the President's political life is hanging by a hair, how can anyone be expected to make an impartial decision? And that's the whole point of the independent counsel law. Should the Democratic Congress investigate? Should the Republican Justice Department investigate? No. It should be an independent counsel who is not connected with the political system when the charges are this serious. That is the reason there's an independent counsel law. That is the reason we sought an independent counsel. And once you reject it, any attempt to get at the truth is gone, or at the very least perceived to be gone, by the American people who are clamoring for some truth here. Not clamoring on this issue, but clamoring out of Washington to start coming clean and telling the truth. If the Attorney General believes our charges are so political and have no basis in fact, then why is he so afraid to appoint an independent counsel? If he's right, the independent counsel will find nothing, and it would be far better exoneration of the administration than something that the Justice Department, where the buck stops at the President, is done for. Now, the Attorney General in specific has refused to even begin the preliminary investigation. I hope you're aware of that. The first step is to say there's enough evidence for a preliminary investigation to determine if there should be an independent counsel. And they even rejected that. That's how bald-faced this was. And he did so for two reasons. One, he wasn't presented with sufficient details about the potential criminality in the committee letter. And two, that where sufficient evidence would be provided, he would rather investigate internally. The Attorney General's positions reflect an unwarranted reliance on legal technicalities, as well as continued hostility to the independent counsel statute. He's saying there can be no need to start a preliminary investigation until Congress hands him the smoking gun. He says he needs names, dates, times, and places. If we had those, we wouldn't need an independent counsel. The Attorney General is saying, well, what he's saying is this is like requiring a victim of a mugging to have a videotape of the incident, the perpetrator in handcuffs, before you go to the prosecutor. It's backwards. Doesn't make any sense. And so my belief is that we need an independent counsel. My belief is that it will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get to the bottom of this without an independent counsel. We don't know who altered these documents or who ordered them altered. We know they were altered. We know the highest officials in the land were involved in the whole process. To say, until we can prove it, there should be no independent counsel makes a mockery of the whole process.
And I might add that the Attorney General has 60 days in which to determine whether he believes an investigation is warranted and the appointment is warranted. And then he goes to a three-man Republican-appointed court, 3 judges, and they would make the appointment at the end of 60 days. In addition to that, if he wanted to, he can delay another 60 days. So in truth, this is not an issue that he has to face before the November 3rd election. All he has to do is be honest about it and get on with the program. He's got, in fact, 120 days from today before he would have appointed by that 3-judge court panel an independent prosecutor to begin his efforts. Now, that doesn't seem to ask too much in the name of honesty and decency in treatment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
now that this has been ruled out, what are Democrats going to do to redouble their investigative efforts?
Well, we're going to tell you what happened, just like we did today.
Well, how are you going to do that?
Well, we just told you. We'll get you all a copy of all those records and all those reports. Chairman Gonzalez was to have been here, but he is now preparing to make another substantial statement on Iraq this afternoon on the floor. And I think you will have a lot more of that information. It's pretty difficult without trained investigators and criminal prosecutors to do the kind of investigation you want. We'd have to appoint somebody. I don't have people in the Judiciary Committee that can run that kind of an investigation.
And
Do you expect the Democrats to be raising this decision by Barr in the presidential race, and do you expect it to have any impact on the campaign?
Well, I don't know that it will, but certainly I think the facts would be self-evident. I think that the public is entitled to a little better treatment than that cavalier, no, we're not even going to do it.
Do you then expect this to be an issue in the campaign?
In my district, yes.
yeah, I would say, look, you don't know where this is going to roll. In other words, this could be an issue that just goes away. I'm sure they're hoping and praying for that. It could be an issue that snowballs and grows, because if one thing is clear this year, the American people are fed up with Washington. They don't like all the politics that's going on. Now, the White House will accuse us of being political. We'll accuse them of being political. One thing is clear. Independent counsel is not political. Never has been. That's why we want it.
Sarah, what do you want, darling? How you doing?
Fine, thank you. Say, I understand Mr. Barr was at work in the in the Justice Department office down in Atlanta, where all of this went on before he came to Washington. Was he personally involved in holding back and letting the?
I don't believe that's accurate. Sarah, I don't believe that's accurate in fairness to Attorney General.
Came to
His
Washington from
staff
Atlanta.
people.
He came to Washington from Atlanta, and then he appointed one of his old hang-ons, Mr. Whitley, down there to be the United States Attorney down
Not the
there.
same bar. Different bar.
I'm sure he has a good relation with the people down there because they work for him.
That's right.
But I don't think it was that relationship, Sarah.
Well, will you all bring out the names of the companies around Pittsburgh that were so heavily involved?
I think that has been mentioned. Yes, they were the brokers they brokered $5 billion worth of commodity credits through one bank in Atlanta because they had the fix in for that bank to process those. And they had clearance from Washington, and they had clearance from the Agriculture Department, and they had clearance from everybody to, can you imagine they're going to put out $5 billion in loans on agricultural commodities in one little bank in Atlanta? Why would they pick Atlanta for all of it?
An Italian bank at that.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Get it back.
in truth, if the idea is to get the truth out, to quote Congressman Schumer, Congress has virtually all the power that a grand jury would have in an independent counsel. You have subpoena power, and you have the ability to appoint the same quality of investigator that an independent counsel would. My question is, do you plan to go that route?
I don't think we have the money to do it.
you can appropriate yourself the money. So
Well, yes, but that's pretty difficult given the terrible budgets that have been submitted in the last 12 years, which are out of balance and have got the national debt up to about $4 trillion. That makes it pretty difficult.
You know,
Can
the
that argument
difficult-
be made, sir, against appropriating the money for an independent counsel?
Yeah. The difficulty with that kind of thing is we're not supposed to be a prosecutorial agency. The whole idea of the independent counsel law was that when there was so little faith because of the hot nature of allegations that the Justice Department couldn't do it, you'd put it over with another professional prosecutor. None of us are professional prosecutors, and we shouldn't do it.
Yes, sir. What'd you have?
I was just wondering if you ruled out at this point going back to the Attorney General and asking him a second time to reconsider or gathering any more data in presenting the request?
He said in his letter that he'd be glad to have any additional information, and I'm sure he would. And I'm sure he'd treat it the same way. Thank you very much.
He's got the information. I wish you'd ask the Attorney General why he apologized to Kennemetal up in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, because the White House said one time that they were under study. He apologized to that company for getting them involved in the press conference down at the White House.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, considering that it's an election year, how do you expect the American people to take your charges seriously if the White House defense is it's just political?
I think they'll take it pretty seriously because the press has been alert and have been aware. You have paid attention to it. You read the data. You've paid attention to the documentation that has been available. You attended the hearings by Gonzalez. You attended the Rhodes hearings. You attended Barnhart's hearings. You paid attention to it. And I think that they don't have to settle this before the election at all. I just explained to you. It would not very likely be that an independent counsel would be appointed for 120 days. He has the right to put it off until then. And that means the report would not be for some months after that.
You know,
So I don't think it's political. Some of the people have been investigating this for 3 or 4 years. This is not something that just came up.
you ask the American people, and I hope Bill Clinton will, do you think this is just political, or do you think something is really there? And I'll bet 80% of them would say something is really there. When they refuse to appoint an independent counsel,
Yeah.
it makes the American people think even more so that something is really there.
And nobody-
Because they're afraid to get an independent rendition.
And nobody denied that they sent arms, military supplies to Iraq.
Hey, if you're the president and your whole future's hanging in the balance, do you think the American people think a guy appointed by the president is going to do a fair investigation?
This young lady right here. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, would you release a copies of the report that accompanied Barr's letter?
I don't have a lot of copies of it, and it's about 97 pages long. A long, long analysis of why they ought not to do anything about anything ever, except investigate small people, little people that have been accused of some wrongdoing.
Will you make that public?
It's public as far as I'm concerned, yes. I don't have a copy available except, what do we have, 2 copies, John? Well, if you really want it, you can have that other one.
Okay.
And you can read it. I want you to initial each page.
Can we go back?
Yes, sir.
Cynics could get the impression from what is being said here today that Democrats would rather have a political issue than pursue this
No.
critical.
No, that's not true.
That's not right.
Well, I just say
Let-
some
let-
cynics.
I think that's a good
Good point.
accusation.
All in this room, huh?
But I got started in this business in 1986, looking at the loans through the Department of Agriculture. I'm very disappointed in what happened today, but I'm going to continue my efforts to talk to people like Marianne Gazer and others who I'm hopeful will now come forward and give us more details. And I believe the American people's appetite for all the details, whether it's who wrote the bad checks or what the JFK papers say, will play a strong role in ultimately getting all these facts and figures before the American people. It may be that President Clinton will have to get his Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor, and I hope to be around here to help him do that, and we'll go forward with this again in January.
Yes, ma'am.
I am, yes, sir.
The special prosecutor law expires in December. There's only 4 weeks left after this week.
Well, we anticipate that we will.
Can you do that in 4 weeks? And do you really think
We
you
can.
Yep.
We can.
Uh-huh. So you've just, this is a change of tone from a month ago.
See you tomorrow, same time and place probably on that.
Okay.
Can't do what? Renew the law, is what you're saying?
We have to have a new law to extend it. It expires on December the 15th of 1992, and undoubtedly, we'll have a new bill introduced within hours.
How do you think this will help with this renewal? And had support been fading up to this point for the renewal?
I didn't think that support had been fading. Fading in the Republicans, yes, they are against it.
But within the Democratic Party?
Within the Democrats, they certainly are for it. I think we can pass it.
But do you think this will help? And can you?
I think this will overwhelmingly motivate members of Congress to vote in favor of an extension of that law.
But will you have enough to override a veto? I mean, Barr has.
That
made
would
some
be
Well,
the
that's-
ultimate put
Now,
down.
that would be political.
That would really be.
Surely he wouldn't veto something like that.
Then again, we'll wait till President Clinton can
Yes, sir.
Right.
I want to go back to the earlier question about why, with subpoena power,
Why what?
why you don't pursue this yourselves. You've got the subpoena.
Well, we're really not criminal prosecutors, just as Mr. Schumer told you.
But Congress has in the
Yeah,
past.
and there are two other
pursued
issues.
similar
No.
things.
They'll claim executive privilege, and you'll be in court for years. You run into the same problem with intelligence documents that Chairman Gonzalez has run into.
That's right.
I mean, we examined, before we sought an independent counsel, we examined the best way to get to the bottom of this. And we looked at congressional investigation, and it would just get bogged down in legalities before you'd get to a single witness.
Judiciary Committee did a fantastic job in making this thing come this far.
Well, what's the next step now? You mean you're not gonna have hearings on this, Jack?
I don't think we need to. We've already had them. They understand. I think the issues have all been laid out. John, hand me that book. I want to give that to Sarah.
We'll have the names of the companies that were involved
No.
in manufacturing the goods to be
This-
sent over there. They haven't been made public. The names of those companies up there haven't been made public.
Some of them have.
There's a long
Yes.
Very few of them, very few of them.
Well, a lot of them have. The brokers.
Gonzalez.
And Sarah-
I'm not talking about the brokers, I'm talking about the manufacturers of the war goods that we sent to Saddam Hussein.
Well, I don't know that we have the names of
He
the
certainly did.
producers.
George Bush has got 'em. He refused to give them out.
Oh, yeah, but he ain't going to give them to us.
No, he, but he wasn't giving
Here,
them
we had 800 pages in the hearings, and I had Senator Leahy, and we had Congressman Rhodes, we had Congressman Barnard, we had Congressman Gonzalez, and they laid out all of the detail that they know to date. And here it is right here. I want you to
Well,
have
you
that.
haven't
Sir.
had Mary Ann Gaines
want
to
to
talk
autograph
out loud in public, have you?
Well, Rose talked to her, but we haven't got too much.
If you have her talk out, she's got the whole story.
She wants you to
She's got
autograph
it documented.
We'd like to get it out of her. We'd love to have
Well,
her.
she'll give it to you right, all you have to do is ask her to pay her way down here. She doesn't have any money. They fired her and she's
Neither
broke.
do we.
That's to Sarah with love from Jack Brooks.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you.
I used to loan Sarah money when we were both reporters in 1939.
And you charged interest too.
And she paid me back, too, by God. I think she spent it all on beer. Well, that was a long time ago. It wasn't against the law then, you know, for reporters to have a pop every now and then. Yes, sir. I'm sure you wouldn't do any of that now. Not now. No, sir. Go ahead.
The Attorney General's decision was political. Wouldn't it have made more sense for him to delay after the election?
Yes.
Well, of course.
The whole thing?
Of course.
So, and the fact that he decided to report to you up front early, doesn't that argue that it's not
Up
political?
front. Up front.
He would have had to.
Long, sad 14-page letter with all these articles and squabbling about why he can't do anything.
But he could have delayed the whole thing up till after the election?
He
No.
would have had to
So
reject.
30
it
days,
before.
he has to say yes or no.
60. Yeah.
He wanted to get it out of the way as quickly as he could. He killed it.
In 30 days,
early.
he has to reply to us. Then he has 60 days to do an investigation and determine whether he needs an independent counsel, and then he would apply to get one from the panel and would at that time lay out what the guidelines are what the status of the case is and kind of what the general
I think
core of the case would be.
they easily could have made a decision if they were going to reject
Sure.
this because they were afraid of what's in it. They'd rather do it now
Right.
than 60 days from now because it was closer to the election.
But they could extend it for another 60
Right.
if they wanted to.
The independent counsel never would have begun the investigation till after the election, but would have been appointed or not appointed before.
But what Jack's saying is that he could have stalled through a preliminary investigation.
And then, but he...
Looked at that and said, well, there's no reason to...
That's
Yes,
right.
but then it would be much closer to the election. That's 60 days. It was 90 days from July 12th, which is October 12th. So he still would have had to do what he did now by October 12th. Now, if you're
go
being
forward.
political about it, would you rather do it then or now?
And they'd always rather do it now. They think you'll forget.
Then it
All
was
right.
another 30 before the independent counsel be appointed, you know.
All right, partner in the back row, and then we're going to...
Chairman Brooks, do you share Congressman Rose's assessment that you've never seen a case with as many smoking guns as this? Do you-
Looks like it's got so many leads, it looks like a porcupine with quills.
Mr. Chairman, following.
Whatever that is. We don't know about porcupines in the Northeast.
They look like
What is
this.
a porcupine?
They look like
Is
this.
that like a squirrel?
And each one of them will stick you.
Specifically, though, the administration is going to say it's all politics. For the American people who have not been following all of the details of this, what is the most compelling evidence that requires an independent counsel being named?
Two.
All right, give them two. Go ahead, go
I'll give
ahead.
you the two, at least in my book. Number one, that documents, when Congress asked about military weapons being sent to Iraq, documents were altered and changed. The man who altered those documents, Mr. Klosky, said that they were done after conversations with the White House and the State Department. Second, that we have evidence, I mean it's uncontroverted, that somebody in the White House called the U.S. attorney who was looking into the BNL case a year and a half ago and said to go forward with this would be embarrassing. We don't know what else was said. We'll never find out, even if we go to court. The independent counsel would have. Those are pretty strong. That's way beyond, I mean, the magnitude of selling arms to Iraq and $5 billion. That's a huge issue. That's mainly a policy issue right now, a big blunder, mother of all foreign policy blunders, but it's not a criminal issue.
Due to videotape difficulties, we are unable to bring you the conclusion of this news conference with Democratic Representatives Charlie Schumer, Charlie Rose, and Jack Brooks. If you would like more information on the news conference, write to Mr. Brooks' office. It's 2449 Rayburn House Office Building in Washington, D.C., and the zip code is 20515.
C-SPAN, the cable satellite public affairs network, and its companion network, C-SPAN 2, are privately funded to serve the public by America's cable television companies.
Now here is a look at the next few events on the C-SPAN schedule, and please note that all times listed here are Eastern. Coming up in a moment, a preview of the Republican Party convention, which begins next week in Houston, Texas. Then at 6:25.